The snow falling over Chicago wasn't peaceful. It was a whiteout, erasing the city one street at a time, much like the lies erasing our marriage. Vanessa demanded my unlock code with the righteousness of a saint, unaware that I wasn't hiding a mistress. I was hiding the subpoena that would ruin her reputation. She wanted to see my messages to save her conscience. I wanted to save them for the judge. The wind off Lake Michigan hit the glass walls of the penthouse with a violence that sounded like knuckles rapping against a coffin. 38 stories up, Chicago was nothing but a grid of amber lights blurring into the white chaos of a blizzard. David Thorne sat in the Eames lounge chair, the leather cold against his back. He wasn't reading the architectural blueprints spread across his lap. He was listening to the elevator motor engage down the hall. Whir. Click. Ding. It was 1:14 a.m. Vanessa breezed into the apartment, bringing a gust of freezing air and the scent of expensive gin and someone else's cedarwood cologne. She dropped her clutch on the entryway console, a slab of raw concrete David had designed specifically for this space. "You're up," she said, unwinding a silk scarf from her neck. Her voice was tight, brittle. It was the voice she used when she was negotiating a sale at the gallery, not the voice of a wife coming home to her husband. "The wind is loud," David said, folding the blueprints. He didn't stand up. "How was the opening?" "Exhausting. Sebastian is a genius, but he's a child. I had to babysit him all night." She kicked off her heels, wincing. "Why is it so dark in here, David?" "It's morbid." "I like the view," he replied calmly. Vanessa walked into the living room, switching on the floor lamp. The sudden light made David squint. She looked at him, really looked at him, with eyes that were bloodshot and frantic. She was vibrating with a nervous energy that David recognized instantly. In structural engineering, they called it resonance, when the vibration of an object matches the external force, leading to catastrophic failure. She was projecting. The guilt was eating her alive, and she needed a target. "You've been weird lately," she said, walking to the wet bar to pour herself water. Her hand shook as she held the pitcher. "Weird, distant, cold. You're always on that iPad, always checking messages. You lock the screen the second I walk into the room." She turned to face him, the water pitcher forgotten. Who is she, David? David felt a strange sense of detachment. He had been expecting this. He had calculated the load-bearing capacity of her lies, and he knew they were buckling. "There is no she, Vanessa. I'm working on the structural retrofit for the Union Station project." "Liar." The word tore out of her throat. "I see you smiling at your phone. I see the notifications popping up at midnight. You think I'm stupid? You think because I'm just an art dealer I don't notice when my husband checks out?" David remained seated. His pulse didn't even jump. The notifications she saw were alerts from the GPS tracker he had placed in the wheel well of her Range Rover. The smiles were him realizing her location data didn't match her story about visiting her mother. "I'm not cheating on you, Ness," he said, using the nickname that used to make her smile. Now, it just made her flinch. "Prove it." She marched over to him, hand extended, palm up. "Give me your phone. Unlock it. Let me see your texts. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem." David looked at the iPhone resting on the side table. It was a black obelisk containing the death of their marriage. Inside the encrypted Vault app were high-resolution photos of her kissing Sebastian in the gallery alleyway. There were screenshots of her bank transfers to a private account. If he gave her the phone, she wouldn't find a mistress. She would find a mirror reflecting her own ugliness. But if he showed her now, the game was over. She would lawyer up immediately. She would hide assets. She would spin the narrative. He needed the element of surprise. He needed her to file first, to put her lies on public record in a sworn affidavit. He needed her to think she was the righteous victim. "I'm not giving you my phone," David said quietly. Vanessa gasped, a sound of theatrical horror. "Huh, I knew it. You won't do it because you're guilty." "I won't do it because I'm your husband, not your prisoner. This is about privacy, Vanessa. About respect." "Respect?" She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You don't respect me. You're humiliating me. Sleeping with some secretary, probably, while I'm out there working my ass off to build our reputation." Is that what you were doing tonight? Working? David asked, his voice flat. Vanessa froze for a fraction of a second. Yes, I was working. Then you have nothing to worry about. David stood up, taking the phone and sliding it into his pocket. I'm going to sleep in the guest suite. The storm is getting worse. If you walk away with that phone, David, don't bother coming back to this bed, she hissed, tears streaming down her face. Tears of rage. Tears of relief that she could finally paint him as the villain. I can't live with a liar. Neither can I, David whispered. He walked past her, smelling the cedarwood cologne clinging to her dress one last time. He walked down the hallway, the sound of her sobbing echoing against the minimalist walls. He entered the guest room and locked the door. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. He opened his secure email client. To Simpson, K. Attorney at law. Subject, she made the move. Attachment, audio_log_kitchen_deck 24. MP3 Kate, she demanded the phone tonight. She's convinced I'm the one straying. She's going to file. Let her. I have the financials ready for the discovery phase. Proceed with the asset freeze on Monday. David hit send. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the steel frame of the building. But inside, everything was perfectly, terrifyingly still. The guest room bed was too soft. David stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows of the snowstorm dance against the plaster. He hadn't slept. His mind was a churning engine, replaying the scene in the kitchen, but then, inevitably, drifting back to the moment the foundation had actually cracked. It hadn't happened tonight. It had happened 21 days ago. The memory was sharp, high definition, lit by the fluorescent hum of his office in the loop. It was a Tuesday afternoon. David was reviewing the load-bearing calculations for a new high-rise on Wacker Drive. On one screen sat the schematics of steel trusses. On the other, his personal email was open. He had logged into the Joint American Express account, intending only to check if the annual membership fee had been posted. That was when he saw the anomaly. In structural engineering, a collapse is rarely sudden. It is the result of microfractures, tiny stress points that go unnoticed until they connect and sever the integrity of the whole. The Palmer House Hilton Bar, $142.00. Thursday, 8:15 p.m. David blinked. He sat back in his ergonomic chair, the hum of the office fading into a dull buzz. Last Thursday, Vanessa had told him she was at a private viewing in River North with a potential buyer from Hong Kong. She had complained about the buyer's pretentiousness when she got home. She had kicked off her shoes and asked David to rub her feet, sighing about how much she hated selling her soul for art. The Palmer House was nowhere near River North. David didn't panic. He didn't call her. He simply minimized the building schematics and maximized the spreadsheet. He entered forensic mode, a state of mind he used when determining why a balcony had sagged or a retaining wall had buckled. He removed the emotion from the equation. Vanessa was no longer his wife. She was a variable. He scrolled back. Uber ride, $18.50, 11:30 p.m. Pick up, Palmer House. Drop off, the penthouse. He cross-referenced this with his text history. At 10:45 p.m. that night, she had texted him, "Buyer is talking my ear off. So boring. Be home soon. Love you." A gap. There was a gap of 3 hours between the boring dinner and the ride home. David's chest felt tight, a physical pressure compressing his lungs, but his hands remained steady on the mouse. He opened the cloud storage for the family data plan. They shared everything. It was a point of pride, a symbol of their transparent, modern marriage. He pulled the location history for her device. The data points appeared on the map like bruises. Thursday was not an anomaly. It was a pattern. 2 weeks prior, a charge for a French bistro in Lincoln Park, a romantic spot they used to go to years ago. The reservation was for 2. For weeks prior, a weekend retreat in Wisconsin that she claimed was for gallery staff. The GPS showed her phone had never left a private residence in Lake Forest. David zoomed in on the Lake Forest address. He didn't need to look it up. He knew who lived there. Sebastian, the avant-garde genius, whose sculptures looked like twisted wreckage. The man David had shaken hands with at the Christmas party. The man who had looked at Vanessa with a hungry, arrogant smirk while David stood right there, holding her purse. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by awards for architectural excellence, David felt the building of his life shudder. The math was irrefutable. The stress on the marriage exceeded its capacity. He didn't cry. Engineers don't cry when a bridge fails. They analyze why. He remembered sitting there until the cleaning crew arrived, the city lights of Chicago flickering on outside his window. He had a choice then. He could have gone home, screamed, thrown the credit card statement at her, and demanded the truth. It would have been cathartic. It would have been human. But Vanessa was a master of spin. She would claim the dinner was a business meeting. She would say the GPS was glitchy. She would call him paranoid, jealous, controlling. She would make him the villain for checking up on her. No, David had thought, closing the laptop with a soft click. I won't give her the satisfaction of a defense. He needed more than data points. He needed a dossier. He needed to build a case so watertight that not even her charm could leak through it. Back in the present, the guest room was gray with the morning light. The storm had passed, leaving a heavy silence over the city. David sat up. He felt older than he had the night before. The emotional part of him, the part that loved the way she laughed, the part that remembered their vows, was currently buried under tons of concrete. What remained was the engineer. He stood up and straightened his shirt. He heard movement in the kitchen down the hall, the clatter of the espresso machine. He walked to the door, his face composing itself into a mask of tired neutrality. He wasn't going to confront her about Sebastian today. He wasn't going to mention the Palmer House or Lake Forest. Today, he was simply going to let her believe she was winning. He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The war of attrition had begun. The cafe on the ground floor of the Rookery building was cavernous and echoing, filled with the low murmur of business deals and the clinking of porcelain. It was a neutral ground, or at least, David had thought it was when he agreed to meet Marcus for lunch. Marcus was a hedge fund manager and one of the gallery's biggest patrons. He had been the best man at David and Vanessa's wedding 5 years ago. He was the kind of friend who slapped you on the back and bought the first round of scotch. Today, however, Marcus didn't offer a handshake. He offered a tight, sympathetic grimace and kept his hands wrapped around his coffee cup as if trying to warm them against a chill that wasn't in the air. You look tired, Dave, Marcus said, bypassing the usual pleasantries about the market or the Bears game. Busy season, David replied, cutting into his panini. He kept his voice even, ignoring the knot tightening in his stomach. The structural audit on the Riverfront project is due next week. Marcus nodded, but his eyes didn't track. He looked over David's shoulder, then down at the table. Right. The work. Vanessa mentioned you've been buried in it. Obsessed, even. David paused, his knife hovering over the plate. There it was. The first drop of poison. I take my job seriously, Marcus. You know that. Sure, Marcus said quickly, too quickly. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that felt more patronizing than intimate. Look, man, we've known each other a long time. I just wanted to check in. Vanessa, she came by the office yesterday. She was a mess. David carefully set down his knife and fork. He took a sip of water to wash down the dryness in his throat. Did she? She was crying, Dave. Said she's scared. Marcus looked at him now, searching his face for a crack, for a sign of instability. She said you've been locking doors, hiding your phone, checking her mileage. She used the word controlling. She said she feels like she's walking on eggshells in her own house. The injustice of it hit David like a physical blow. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. She was the one lying about her location. She was the one sleeping with a pretentious artist in Lake Forest. She was the one who had turned their marriage into a minefield. David was merely checking the mileage to confirm the blast radius. But Vanessa had struck first. She knew that in their circle, the person who cried first won the sympathy vote. She was painting a picture of a fragile, artistic soul trapped by a cold, calculating engineer. If David tried to explain now, no, I checked the mileage because she's cheating, he would sound exactly like the paranoid husband she described. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. She was inoculating their friends against the truth. She's stressed, David said, his voice dangerously calm. The gallery is under a lot of pressure. Marcus sighed, leaning back and shaking his head. Come on, Dave. Don't deflect. I'm talking about you. She thinks you're having a breakdown. She's worried you might do something rash. Do something rash. The implication hung in the air. They were questioning his sanity. David looked at his friend, his former friend. He corrected himself. He saw the judgment in Marcus's eyes. The decision had already been made. Vanessa was the victim. David was the villain. David had a choice. He could pull out his phone right now. He could open the Vault app. He could show Marcus the photo of Vanessa's hand on Sebastian's thigh at the work dinner. He could play the audio recording of her lying about her whereabouts. He could shatter her narrative in 10 seconds. But if he did that, Marcus would tell Vanessa. Vanessa would know David had evidence. She would destroy the rest of the paper trail. She would transfer the money. She would claim the photos were doctored or innocent. David needed the judge to see it first, not Marcus. I appreciate your concern, David said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He signaled the waiter for the check. But my marriage is between me and my wife. I'm not going to discuss it in a coffee shop. Marcus's expression hardened. The sympathy evaporated, replaced by cold disapproval. Fine. Have it your way. But you're isolating yourself, David. And people are starting to talk. If you push everyone away, there won't be anyone left to catch you when you fall. I'm used to standing on my own, David said. He stood up, throwing a $20 bill onto the table. Thanks for lunch. He walked out of the rookery into the biting Chicago wind. He didn't look back. He took out his phone and saw a notification from Instagram. It was a post from Vanessa, uploaded 10 minutes ago. It was a black and white selfie of her looking pensive, staring out a rainy window. The caption read, "Sometimes the silence in your own home is the loudest thing in the world. Hashtag mental health, hashtag stay strong, hashtag healing." It had already been liked by 30 people, including Marcus. David stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over the block button, but he stopped himself. He didn't block her. He screenshotted the post. He screenshotted the likes. He added it to the folder named Exhibit D, Public Defamation. The rumor mill was turning, grinding his reputation into dust. But David knew something Vanessa didn't. Dust settles. And when it does, it reveals everything that was hidden underneath. The restaurant was on the 45th floor, a place of muted gray tones and hushed conversations, designed for people who needed to discuss millions of dollars without raising their voices. Outside, the sky was the color of a fresh bruise, low and heavy over the lake. David sat opposite Kate Simpson. She didn't look like a shark. She looked like a grandmother who baked cookies, with silver hair cut into a sensible bob and a soft, cashmere cardigan. But David knew her reputation. In Chicago legal circles, she was known as the Scalpel. She didn't bludgeon opponents, she excised them. On the table between them lay a thick manila folder. It contained the printouts of the bank statements, the GPS logs, the text transcripts, and the screenshot of Vanessa's Instagram post from yesterday. Kate adjusted her reading glasses and flipped through the pages. Her expression was unreadable. She paused on the photo of Vanessa and Sebastian entering the private residence in Lake Forest. She tapped the image with a manicured fingernail. Clear identification, Kate murmured, more to herself than to David. Timestamped. Geotagged. Good. She flipped to the next page, the screenshot of Vanessa's post about silence and healing. A small, dry smile touched Kate's lips. She's playing the victim card early, Kate said, closing the folder and taking a sip of her tea. Standard operating procedure for a narcissist who feels control slipping. She's trying to poison the jury pool before we've even selected a court. It's working, David said, his voice tight. My friends are looking at me like I'm a monster. She's telling everyone I'm controlling, that I'm paranoid. If I don't defend myself soon, I won't have a reputation left to save. Kate set her cup down with a sharp clink. She leaned forward, her eyes suddenly hard and piercing. David, do you want to be right at a dinner party? Or do you want to keep your penthouse and your pension? David held her gaze. I want my life back. Then you have to let her lie, Kate said flatly. In Illinois, infidelity impacts the financials, but what really kills in court is perjury. Right now, She's telling her friends lies. That's gossip. It's painful, but it's not illegal. We need her to tell those lies to a judge. David felt a cold knot in his stomach. You want me to let her sue me? I want her to file first, Kate corrected. I want her to file for divorce based on your alleged cruelty. I want her to sign a sworn affidavit stating that she has been faithful and that you are the one destroying the marriage. I want her to demand alimony based on her inability to work due to the emotional distress you've caused. Kate opened her hands as if presenting a gift. And once she has signed that document, once she has committed to that narrative under penalty of perjury, that is when we open this folder. David looked out the window. The city looked like a circuit board from up here, cold and logical. He understood the engineering of what Kate was suggesting. It was a controlled demolition. You weaken the supports, you let the structure's own weight bring it down, but you have to wait for the exact right moment to detonate. She demanded my phone password again this morning, David said quietly. She blocked the doorway. She screamed that I was gaslighting her. Good, Kate said. Let her scream. Let her demand. Every time she accuses you of hiding something, she is projecting her own guilt. It means she feels safe. She thinks you are weak, David. She thinks you are retreating. I am retreating. No, Kate said, her voice dropping to a steel whisper. You are drawing her into the kill box. But you have to be disciplined. No emotional outbursts. No, I know what you did last summer's speeches. You continue to be the boring, detached husband. You sleep in the guest room. You work late. You let her believe her plan is working. Kate reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a retainer agreement. She is going to try to break you in the next few weeks, Kate warned. She will escalate. She might stage a confrontation. She might try to access your devices physically. She needs to provoke a reaction to justify her narrative. Can you handle that? Can you look her in the eye while she lies to you and say absolutely nothing? David thought of the empty feeling in his chest when he looked at Vanessa now. He thought of this stress test on his marriage that had failed weeks ago. The love wasn't there anymore to get in the way. There was only the structural damage. He took the pen from Kate's hand. I analyze fractures for a living, Kate, David said, signing his name with a steady hand. I know how to wait for the break. Excellent, Kate said, sliding the folder back into her bag. Go home, David. Change your passwords again. And wait for the papers. They're coming. David stood up. He felt lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because he finally knew where to carry it. He walked out of the restaurant, ready to go home to his wife and play the role of the villain perfectly, right up until the moment the curtain fell. The violation didn't start with a scream. It started with a beam of blue light cutting through the darkness of the guest room. David was a light sleeper, a habit from his days inspecting sites where a misplaced step could mean a 60-foot drop. He woke instantly, his heart hammering a warning rhythm against his ribs. He didn't move. He kept his breathing steady, feigning the deep rhythm of REM sleep, but his eyes cracked open just a slit. Vanessa was standing over him. She looked ghostly in the pale glow of the streetlights filtering through the sheer curtains. She was wearing her silk robe, but her hair was disheveled, her face a mask of manic concentration. In her hand, she held his phone. She was trying to guess the passcode. Tap, 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 shake. David watched through his eyelashes as the screen flashed red. She tried again. Her thumb moved frantically. It was a desperate, clumsy hacking attempt born of paranoia. She tried his birthday. Error. She tried their anniversary. Error. She tried the code to the alarm system. iPhone unavailable. Try again in 1 minute. She let out a frustrated, strangled sob, a sound of pure, venomous rage. She raised the phone as if to throw it against the wall, and that was when David moved. He sat up, his movement smooth and sudden. It's 6 digits, Vanessa, not 4. Vanessa gasped, dropping the phone onto the duvet as if it were burning hot. She stumbled back, clutching the lapels of her robe. For a second, she looked terrified, like a deer caught in headlights. But then, the fear twisted instantly into aggression. You changed it, she screamed, abandoning any pretense of stealth. She flicked on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with blinding, harsh light. You changed the code. You never changed the code. David picked up the phone. The screen was locked out. He looked at her calmly, shielding his eyes from the glare. I changed it last week. Because of this. Because I knew you couldn't respect a closed door. Respect? She laughed, high and shrill. She paced around the foot of the bed, her hands waving in the air. You're hiding things from me. I have a right to know. Who are you protecting, David? Who is she? There is no she, David said, swinging his legs out of bed. He stood up. He was taller than her, but he made sure to keep his posture non-threatening, shoulders slumped, hands visible. But there is a us that is dying. And watching you try to break into my phone while I sleep. That's the autopsy. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me with your engineering bullshit, she spat. You're gaslighting me. You're making me feel crazy so you can get away with whatever you're doing. David looked at her. He saw the pupil dilation. He saw the way she was already rewriting this moment in her head. Tomorrow, she would tell Marcus and the others that David had attacked her, that he had terrified her in the middle of the night. He was in the danger zone. Staying in this apartment was no longer just emotionally draining. It was a liability. I'm leaving, David said. He walked past her to the closet. He pulled out his overnight duffel bag, the leather one he used for site inspections. What? No. You can't leave, Vanessa said, following him. Her voice wavered, losing some of its steam. We have the gala on Friday. You have to be here. David opened a drawer and began packing efficiently. 2 shirts, underwear, his toiletries kit, the backup hard drive he kept hidden in his sock drawer. I'm going to a hotel, Vanessa. I'll send for the rest of my things later. You're abandoning me? She grabbed his arm. Her grip was tight, nails digging into his skin. You're walking out on your marriage? David looked down at her hand on his arm. He didn't pull away violently. He just waited. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until she let go, her hand dropping to her side. You pushed me out, David said quietly. He zipped the bag shut. The sound was final, like a body bag being closed. You decided I was the enemy weeks ago. I'm just giving you the battlefield. If you walk out that door, Vanessa hissed, her eyes narrowing, don't think you can come back. I will change the locks. I will tell everyone you left me. I will ruin you, David. You can try, David said. He picked up the bag and walked out of the room. He walked down the long hallway of the penthouse he had designed, past the art she had chosen, past the life they had built. He didn't look back at the woman screaming his name from the bedroom doorway. He stepped into the private elevator and pressed the button for the garage. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of her voice. Silence returned. David leaned his forehead against the cool metal of the elevator wall. He exhaled a breath he felt like he had been holding for a month. He checked his phone. It was still disabled for another 30 seconds. He wasn't angry. He felt a strange, cold clarity. By forcing him out, she had given him exactly what Kate Simpson had said he needed, a physical separation initiated by her erratic behavior. He walked to his car, threw the bag in the passenger seat, and drove out into the empty Chicago streets. He headed toward the Drake Hotel. He would check in, sleep for 4 hours, and then call Kate. The setup was complete. Now, he just had to wait for her to pull the trigger. 3 days in the Drake Hotel had reduced David's life to a series of beige rituals. Beige walls, beige carpet, the beige hum of the heating unit that rattled every time the wind off the lake picked up. It was a stark contrast to the glass and steel precision of the penthouse, but it was quiet. There was no pacing, no accusations, no heavy scent of cedarwood cologne lingering in the air. David stood on the unfinished 32nd floor of the new West Loop commercial tower. He was wearing a hard hat and a high-visibility vest over his wool coat, the wind whipping around the exposed steel girders. Below him, Chicago was a grid of gray sludge and traffic. He was inspecting a weld on a load-bearing column that looked suspect. He ran his gloved hand over the cold steel, feeling for the imperfection. David Thorne. The voice didn't belong on a construction site. It wasn't shouting over a jackhammer. It was polite, firm, and out of place. David turned. Standing near the construction elevator was a man in a nondescript windbreaker, holding a thick manila envelope against his chest to protect it from the dust. He looked like a tourist who had taken a very wrong turn. "I'm Thorne," David said, stepping back from the edge. The man walked forward, dodging a coil of wire. He didn't offer a hand to shake. He extended the envelope. "You've been served," the man said. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He was just a courier of destruction. "Sign here to acknowledge receipt." David took the clipboard. The wind flapped the paper violently. He signed his name, a quick, sharp scrawl. The man took the clipboard back, nodded once, and turned to head back to the elevator. David was left alone on the precipice, holding the weight of his marriage in his hands. He didn't open it immediately. He walked over to a stack of drywall sheets and sat down. He unclasped the envelope and pulled out the legal filing. It was heavy, bonded paper. Vanessa Thorne versus David Thorne. He skipped the preamble and went straight to the allegations. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Grounds: mental cruelty, constructive abandonment, suspected adultery. David read the paragraphs detailing his crimes. According to the document, his refusal to share his phone password was psychological torment. His decision to sleep in the guest room was withdrawal of affection. His silence was intimidation. She hadn't just filed for divorce. She had filed a manifesto. He turned to the relief sought. Exclusive possession of the marital residence, the penthouse. Spousal support, alimony, commensurate with the lifestyle established during the marriage. Freezing of all joint assets pending forensic accounting. Legal fees to be paid by the respondent, David. She wanted the apartment. She wanted him to pay her to live in the apartment he designed, likely so she could move Sebastian in before the ink was dry. David felt a surge of bile rise in his throat. It was the natural, biological reaction to injustice. He wanted to tear the papers apart. He wanted to drive to the gallery, walk into her glass-walled office, and scream the truth in front of her staff. Mental cruelty? He looked at the date on the filing. She had filed this yesterday morning, less than 12 hours after he walked out. She had been planning this. She had the paperwork ready. She just needed him to leave the house to trigger the abandonment clause. He took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of wet concrete and ozone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed Kate Simpson. "She pulled the trigger," David said when she answered. "Read it to me," Kate said. Her voice was calm, professional, an anchor in the storm. David summarized the demands. When he got to the part about suspected adultery, Kate actually chuckled. "Perfect," Kate said. She put it in writing. She made adultery a central issue of the divorce. "Why is that perfect?" "She's dragging my name through the mud." "Because, David," Kate explained, "by citing adultery and demanding a forensic accounting of your assets to prove it, she has opened the door for reciprocal discovery. We don't even have to fight for it. We simply agree. We say, 'Yes, Your Honor, we agree that transparency is key. We will open our books, provided the petitioner does the same.'" David looked at the skyline. He could see the building where his penthouse was. It looked small from here. Just another glint of glass in a city of millions. "She thinks she's won," David said. "She thinks I'm going to settle to avoid the embarrassment." "She's counting on your pride being your weakness," Kate said. "She doesn't know your pride is already gone. Accept service. Don't call her. Don't text her angry paragraphs. Silence is your weapon now." "She wants the apartment. Let her have the walls for now," Kate replied. "We're going for the foundation." David hung up. He folded the papers and slid them back into the envelope. He stood up, brushing the drywall dust off his coat. He walked back to the steel column he had been inspecting. He found the weld again. It was a hairline fracture, barely visible to the naked eye, but deep enough to compromise the integrity of the entire floor if left unchecked. He took out his marker and drew a red circle around the flaw. Rejected. He would treat his marriage the same way. The inspection was over. The demolition was approved. He walked toward the elevator, the envelope tucked under his arm like a weapon he hadn't drawn yet. River North was electric on a Friday night, the air vibrating with the bass of passing luxury SUVs and the chatter of the city's elite. The sidewalks were shoveled clean, the snow piled high in gray mounds at the curbs, but inside the gallery, it was a warm, golden aquarium of wealth. David sat in his sedan, parked illegally in a loading zone across the street. The engine was off, the interior cold. He wasn't there to make a scene. He was there because his lawyer needed context. She's claiming she's too traumatized to work, Kate had told him earlier that afternoon. She's asking for temporary support because the breakdown of the marriage has left her emotionally incapacitated. David looked through the windshield. Through the floor-to-ceiling plate glass windows of the gallery, Vanessa didn't look incapacitated. She looked triumphant. She was wearing a backless emerald dress that he had bought her for her birthday last year. She held a champagne flute in one hand, her other hand gesturing animatedly as she held court with a group of donors. She threw her head back and laughed, a practiced, dazzling laugh that made the diamonds at her throat catch the gallery lights. She was the star of her own tragedy. Then, Sebastian appeared. He drifted into the frame like smoke. He was wearing a velvet blazer, playing the part of the tortured visionary. He moved into Vanessa's orbit with a familiarity that made David's stomach tighten. It wasn't an overt grope. It was the subtle, magnetic pull of two people who had already crossed the line. Sebastian leaned in close to whisper something in her ear. Vanessa didn't pull away. She leaned back into him, her shoulder brushing his chest. It was a microscopic movement, invisible to the casual observer, but to David, who knew every shift in her body language, it was a scream. He raised his camera. It was a DSLR he used for site documentation, equipped with a telephoto lens. Click. Vanessa touching Sebastian's arm, lingering. Click. Sebastian handing her a fresh glass of champagne, his fingers grazing hers for too long. Click. The way they looked at each other when the donors turned away, a look of conspiring arrogance. Traumatized, David whispered to himself in the dark car. He watched as Marcus, his former best friend, approached the couple. Marcus shook Sebastian's hand warmly. He kissed Vanessa on the cheek. They stood together, a new trinity, the artist, the muse, and the enabler. They were rewriting history in real time, erasing David from the narrative before the divorce decree was even stamped. A strange sensation washed over David. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even sadness. It was the feeling of watching a building being demolished from a safe distance. The dust was rising, the structure was gone, and all that remained was the realization that it had been condemned for a long time. Inside the gallery, Vanessa checked her phone. She frowned for a split second, perhaps annoyed that David hadn't sent a begging text, hadn't tried to call, hadn't given her the satisfaction of a reaction. She wanted him to be the crazy ex-husband pounding on the glass. She wanted the drama to fuel her art. David lowered the camera. He checked the display screen. The photos were crisp. They were time-stamped. Exhibit F, contradiction of claims. He didn't need to see them leave together. He didn't need to see them get into a cab. He had what he needed. Proof that while she was telling her lawyer she was a broken woman, she was out celebrating the destruction of her husband. He started the engine. The heater blasted warm air against his frozen hands. He took one last look at his wife. She was toasting to the room, radiant and hollow. She had the gallery, she had the boyfriend, and she thought she had the penthouse. David put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. He left them to their champagne and their victory lap. They didn't know the bill was coming. The conference room in Kate Simpson's firm smelled of lemon polish and expensive leather. It was a sterile environment, designed to strip the emotion out of the end of a life. David sat at the head of the mahogany table. In front of him sat a black external hard drive, no larger than a deck of cards. Across the table, Kate was reviewing a document that had just arrived via courier from Vanessa's attorney. The lawyer, a man named Sterling who specialized in high-conflict divorces, had drafted the request with a sledgehammer. "They want everything, David," Kate said, looking over her reading glasses. "This is a scorched earth discovery request. They are asking for 5 years of text messages, all email correspondence, credit card statements, GPS data from your vehicle, and browser history." She slid the paper across the table. Specifically, Kate pointed to paragraph 4. "They are demanding the passcodes to all personal devices, citing your suspicious behavior on the night of December 24th as probable cause for hiding assets or illicit relationships." David looked at the document. It was aggressive. It was designed to intimidate him into a settlement. Vanessa was betting that David, private, introverted David, would be so terrified of having his privacy invaded that he would write her a check just to make it stop. She was projecting again. She assumed that because she had things to hide, he must as well. She was so convinced of her own narrative that she had forgotten who she was married to. She was married to a man who inspected steel for a living. A man who didn't fear scrutiny, provided the structure was sound. Sterling called me this morning. Kate continued. He said if we object to the scope of discovery, they will file an emergency motion to compel. They want to fight, David. They want to drag this out in court to drain your resources. David reached out and touched the black hard drive. It was cold to the touch. We're not going to object, David said. Kate smiled, a small, sharp expression that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't think so. Give them everything, David instructed. The texts, the emails, the GPS logs, every single byte of data they asked for. He pushed the hard drive across the polished wood. Inside that drive was the truth. It showed his late nights were spent on the structural analysis software for the Union Station project. It showed his texts were to contractors, his mother, and, painfully, to Vanessa, asking if she wanted takeout. It showed his browser history was filled with engineering forums and news sites. It was the digital footprint of a boring, faithful, hard-working husband. And when we hand this over, David said, leaning back, what happens next? The reciprocity rule, Kate said, tapping her pen on the table. Illinois is an equitable division state, but discovery is a two-way street. If the petitioner demands full digital transparency to prove adultery, the respondent is entitled to the same scope of discovery to defend against the claim. She pulled out a fresh document from her briefcase. It was already drafted. Respondent's first request for production of documents. This, Kate said, demands Vanessa's phone, her iPad, her cloud backups, and her private bank statements for the same 5-year period. Since she has made adultery the centerpiece of her filing, she cannot claim privacy privilege on her communications. David looked at the document. This was the trap. Vanessa had been so focused on getting into his phone that she hadn't realized she was unlocking her own. She deletes her messages, David said. She uses an encrypted app for Sebastian. It doesn't matter, Kate replied. We're not asking for the phone she has in her purse today. We're asking for the cloud backup history. And thanks to you. Kate glanced at the hard drive. We already have the mirror image from before she changed her passwords. If she deletes anything now, or if she fails to turn over the messages we already know exist, it's spoliation of evidence. That's a felony level of misconduct in a civil trial. David stood up. He walked to the window, looking down at the loop. The city was moving below him. Thousands of people rushing to meetings, to lovers, to homes that were either happy or crumbling. He imagined Vanessa right now. She was probably at the gallery, telling Sterling that she was about to crack him wide open. She was probably feeling smug, thinking that by the end of the week, she would find the mistress she needed to justify her own betrayal. She had asked for the truth. He was going to give it to her. Send it, David said, turning back to Kate. Send the drive. And send the demand for her records immediately after. It'll be on Sterling's desk by 9 a.m. tomorrow, Kate promised. David buttoned his coat. I wonder if she'll remember her password. Kate didn't laugh. She just closed the file. She better. Because the judge is going to ask for it. David walked out of the office. The elevator ride down was smooth, weightless. He felt the specific calm of an engineer who has just detonated the charge and is now simply waiting for the sound to reach him. The mediation room on the 50th floor of the Leo Burnett building was designed to intimidate. It had a view of the icy expanse of Lake Michigan that made human problems feel insignificant, and a table long enough to land a small aircraft on. David sat on the left side, Kate Simpson beside him. On the right sat Vanessa and her attorney, Sterling. A retired judge, acting as the mediator, sat at the head of the table, flanked by stacks of binders. The mood was asymmetrical. Vanessa looked confident, dressed in a soft, cream-colored suit that suggested vulnerability and grace. Sterling looked like a man about to collect a large contingency fee. He was tapping a gold pin against his legal pad, a rhythmic, arrogant sound. "We have reviewed the respondent's production," Sterling began, tossing a thin folder onto the center of the table. His tone was dismissive. "Mr. Thorne's devices are remarkably sanitized. No texts, no deleted calls. A very clean digital footprint. Almost suspiciously so." Sterling leaned back, smirking at David. "It takes a lot of effort to scrub a phone that thoroughly, Mr. Thorne. But we will find the metadata eventually." Vanessa shot David a look of pitying disgust. "You always were obsessive, David. You think deleting things makes them go away?" David didn't answer. He was watching the mediator. However, Kate Simpson interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a razor wire. She didn't look at Sterling. She looked directly at the mediator. "We are not here to discuss what Mr. Sterling thinks might exist. We are here to discuss what actually exists. Specifically, the petitioner's production." Kate placed a heavy, black binder on the table. It made a loud, dull thud that silenced the room. "Mrs. Thorne," Kate said, opening the binder. "In your sworn affidavit filed with the court, you stated that the breakdown of the marriage was caused solely by Mr. Thorne's emotional cruelty and suspected infidelity. You also stated, under oath, that you have been a faithful and supportive spouse." "I have," Vanessa said, her chin lifting defiantly. "I have carried this marriage for 2 years while he treated me like a stranger." "Is that so?" Kate turned a page. "Then can you explain Exhibit C?" "A series of text messages exchanged between a number ending in 5508, registered to you, and a number registered to Mr. Sebastian Vance, dated December 14th? Vanessa froze. The color drained from her face so fast, it looked like a light switch had been flipped. Sterling stopped tapping his pen. "Objection," Sterling said automatically. "Relevance. It goes to credibility and the claim of fault," the mediator said, waving his hand. "Proceed." Kate began to read. Her voice was devoid of emotion, which made the words sound even more grotesque. "Kate, message sent at 11:42 p.m. He's asleep. He's so boring, Sebastian. It's like living with a robot. I can't wait to be in your studio tomorrow." "Kate, message sent December 20th. Don't worry about the money. Once I file, I'll get the penthouse. He's desperate to keep his reputation. He'll settle just to keep me quiet." "Kate, message sent December 24th, the night of the argument. He's refusing to unlock his phone. I think he knows. I need to flip the script. If I accuse him first, he goes on the defensive. I'm going to make him think he's crazy." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. Sterling grabbed the binder. He scanned the pages, his face turning a shade of red that matched the spine of the legal books on the shelf. He looked at his client. "Vanessa, you told me there were no texts. You told me you used an encrypted app." I did," Vanessa stammered. She looked at David, her eyes wide with horror. "I deleted them. I deleted everything." "How did you?" "You deleted them from the phone you hold in your hand." David spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, the voice of an engineer explaining why a bridge had collapsed. "But you backed them up to the family cloud server 3 weeks ago. You didn't realize this sync all devices setting was on. This is an invasion of privacy." Vanessa shrieked, standing up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. "He hacked me. He's a stalker." "It is a shared account, Mrs. Thorne," Kate said smoothly. "Legally, it is common property. And frankly, this is the evidence you demanded. You invoked the reciprocity rule. You wanted full transparency. Here it is." Kate flipped to the final tab. "We also have the GPS logs," Kate added, matching the dates of these messages to locations in Lake Forest, River North, and the Palmer House Hotel. Sterling closed the binder. He looked defeated. He knew the law. With this evidence, Vanessa's claim for alimony was dead. Her claim for mental cruelty was proved to be a fabrication, a calculated perjury. "We are prepared to file a motion for dismissal of your petition and a counterpetition for divorce based on adultery and fraud," Kate said. "And given the premeditated nature of the texts regarding the financial settlement, we will be asking for sanctions to cover Mr. Thorne's legal fees." Vanessa slumped back into her chair. She looked small. The liberated victim persona had disintegrated, leaving behind a panicked woman caught in her own trap. "David," she whispered, tears spilling over. Real tears this time, tears of terror. "David, please. Don't do this. We can talk. We can fix this." David looked at her across the long expanse of the mahogany table. He remembered the night she demanded his password. He remembered the way she had looked at him with such righteous hatred. "There's nothing to fix, Ness," David said quietly. "The structure failed a long time ago. We're just clearing the debris now." He stood up and buttoned his jacket. He didn't look at her again. He nodded to the mediator, then turned to Kate. "Let's go," he said. They walked out of the room, leaving Vanessa sitting in the wreckage of her own making, with her lawyers staring at her in cold, expensive silence. The industrial elevator in Sebastian's West Loop studio rattled as it ascended, a sound that usually made Vanessa's heart flutter with anticipation. Today, it sounded like a cage door slamming shut. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge her mascara, though the damage was already done. The mediation had been a massacre. Sterling had dropped her case within 20 minutes of leaving the conference room, telling her that representing a client who perjures herself was a liability he couldn't afford. He had fired her, but it didn't matter. She still had Sebastian. She had the passion, the art, the future they had whispered about in bed while David was busy being boring and reliable. The elevator door slid open. The studio was vast, smelling of turpentine and linseed oil. Canvases were stacked against the brick walls, violent, chaotic splashes of color that she had once called genius. Sebastian was there, standing by a large work table, wrapping a sculpture in bubble wrap. He didn't look up when she entered. "They have everything, Sebastian," Vanessa said, her voice trembling. She walked toward him, needing his arms around her, needing to be told that they would weather the scandal together. David had a backup of the texts. "The judge knows. It's over." Sebastian paused. He slowly cut a piece of tape with a utility knife. "Snick." "I know," he said. His voice was cool, detached. "Marcus called me." "Marcus?" Vanessa blinked. "Why would Marcus call you?" "Because he's pulling his funding for the spring exhibition," Sebastian said, finally turning to face her. His eyes, usually warm and seductive, were now flat and hard. "He said he doesn't want his foundation associated with a messy domestic dispute." Apparently, David showed him the timeline. "It's not a dispute, it's a divorce," Vanessa pleaded, reaching for his hand. "And now we can be together properly. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the gallery. I just want—" Sebastian pulled his hand away. It was a recoil, sharp and instinctive. "Vanessa, stop." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm an artist. I sell a brand. My brand is avant-garde, mysterious, sexy. My brand is not named co-conspirator in a fraud lawsuit." "Fraud," Vanessa whispered. "You lied on court documents, Ness. That's fraud. And you dragged me into it." He turned back to the sculpture. "My wife's lawyers are already asking questions." The air left Vanessa's lungs. "Your wife?" "Separated," Sebastian corrected quickly, shrugging. "But we have an arrangement. She tolerates the muses as long as I remain discreet." "You are no longer discreet. You are a subpoena waiting to happen." He picked up the wrapped sculpture. "You should go. I have a buyer coming in 20 minutes. I can't have you here." Vanessa stood there, paralyzed. She looked at the man she had destroyed her life for. He wasn't a genius. He was just a narcissist with a paintbrush. She had burned down a skyscraper to warm her hands at a bonfire, and now the fire was out. "You used me," she choked out. "We used each other," Sebastian replied, not even looking at her. "You were bored. I was available. Don't romanticize it." Vanessa turned and ran. She ran back to the elevator, the metal grate closing between them like a prison sentence. She stumbled out onto the snowy street. The Chicago wind cut through her coat, freezing the tears on her face. She fumbled for her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it in the slush, picking it up frantically. She dialed the only number she knew by heart, the number she had ignored for weeks. Ring, ring, ring. "David?" She sobbed into the receiver when the line connected. "David, please. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I was confused. He manipulated me. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence that carried the weight of 10 years of marriage. David, please say something. I'm cold. I'm scared. Can I come home? We can talk about the counseling. We can fix the foundation. You always say anything can be fixed if the foundation is good. The foundation is gone. Vanessa, David's voice came through the speaker. It wasn't angry. It was just empty. You didn't just crack it. You dug it up. No. I love you, she screamed to the empty street. I love you. You don't love me, David said. You just have nowhere else to go. Click. The line went dead. Vanessa lowered the phone. She looked up at the skyline. Somewhere in those thousands of lights was the penthouse she had fought for, the home she had designed, the husband who had adored her. She was standing on the pavement, surrounded by millions of people, and she had never been more completely, utterly alone. The snow began to fall harder, covering her tracks, erasing her presence from the city, one flake at a time. The silence in the penthouse was different now. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of a waiting argument, nor was it the terrified silence of a secret being kept. It was simply empty. It was the clean, acoustic hollowness of a space that no longer held a life. David stood in the center of the living room. The furniture was gone. The Eames chair, the Italian sofa, the expensive rugs, all auctioned off or moved into storage. What remained were the architectural bones of the place, the polished concrete floors, the steel pillars, and the floor-to-ceiling glass that framed the city of Chicago. It was 30 days since the mediation. The divorce decree sat on the passenger seat of his car downstairs, a stack of papers stamped with the seal of Cook County. It was finished. Vanessa had settled for a fraction of what she demanded, terrified of a perjury charge that Kate Simpson had held over her head like a guillotine. She had moved to a smaller apartment in Lincoln Park, alone. Sebastian had returned to his wife, his muse, discarded the moment she became a liability. David walked to the window. The storm that had raged for weeks had finally broken. The sky was a piercing, brilliant blue, the kind of winter sky that hurts to look at. Lake Michigan was a sheet of frozen iron, cracking under the morning sun. It's a magnificent space, Mr. Thorne, a voice echoed from the entryway. Mrs. Prentice, the real estate agent, clicked across the floor. She was holding a folder, looking around with professional appreciation. The market is hungry for this kind of minimalism. I have 3 buyers interested already. The view alone is worth the asking price. David ran his hand along the raw concrete console table he had designed. He remembered drawing the sketches for it on a napkin during their honeymoon. He remembered Vanessa saying it was too cold, too industrial. He had built it anyway. It has good bones, David said. It does, Mrs. Prentice agreed. Ideally, we'd stage it. Put some warmth back in. A few throws, some art on the walls. She trailed off, realizing her mistake. Or we can sell it as a blank canvas. A fresh start. A blank canvas is better, David said. He looked at the spot near the wet bar where Vanessa used to stand and drink her gin, accusing him of indifference. He looked at the hallway leading to the bedroom where he had packed his bag in the dark. For a long time, David had treated his life like a building that just needed more reinforcement. He thought if he just added more patience, more money, more stability, he could keep the structure from collapsing. He hadn't realized that the foundation itself was built on a fault line. You cannot retrofit a marriage that was never load-bearing to begin with. Do you want a moment alone? Mrs. Prentice asked gently. No, David said. He turned away from the window. I'm done here. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the set of heavy, magnetic keys. He placed them on the concrete console. They made a sharp, final clink. He didn't feel sad. He didn't feel angry. He felt the specific, professional satisfaction of an engineer who has successfully cleared a condemned site. The debris was gone. The hazard was removed. Lock up when you leave, David said. Good luck, Mr. Thorne, the agent called after him. David walked to the elevator. He stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, obscuring the view of the apartment for the last time, he didn't look back. He watched the numbers count down on the display. Gee, the doors opened. David stepped out into the lobby, and pushed through the revolving doors onto the street. The air was frigid, biting at his lungs, but it felt clean. It smelled of snow and exhaust and possibility. He buttoned his coat and walked toward his car. He had a meeting at 2 p.m. with the architects for the Union Station project. They were designing a new atrium, something made of light and glass, something that could withstand the pressure of the city but remain open to the sky. He had a new project. He had a blank sheet of paper, and for the first time in years, the design was entirely up to him. David Thorne smiled, unlocked his car, and drove into the sunlight.